First of all, happy 2023. 2022 was an interesting year when you look at Canada soccer specifically. As we move into 2023, there are questions we ask, and there are also goals we want to achieve, and there are resolutions. And since it's the first video of 23, I want to put this benchmark out there. So guys, welcome to the Africans. We do primarily Canadian, African content. I'm Ghanaian, Canadian parents. It doesn't really matter. But if you like this type of content, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I normally don't show my face a lot because, it's my face. You don't really need it. But let's go to 23. So the idea is this. 23 thoughts or questions you have when it comes to football, soccer in Canada. Now, these are for me. These are things that I'd like to see. And maybe there are things you like that I say. And perhaps there are things you think, maybe there's something, that I missed on the list. And you say, you know what? You forgot this. So let's go through these 23 things. And this is without the sport. So again, let's see how it goes. This is throughout the sport. So let's see how it goes. Let's start with goal number 1. By the way, this is not in any particular order, but let's go with goal number 1. The men have to win a trophy this year. Now they have Nations League and the Gold Cup coming up. They have 2 games, Curacao and then in Canada for Nations League. If they're able to win those 2 matchups, then they find their way to Nations League semis and final. So, with that being the case, then this summer, we also have the Gold Cup happening. Now, after the success of the year that they had last year, I know they didn't win a game at the World Cup. However, the men's national team have an opportunity. I think looking at them, I feel they are a team that is now just sitting down in the top 4, maybe top 3 spot in CONCACAF, and it's now up to them to show that they belong there. One way to do so would be to push and reach and win a final to really cement that position. And that gives an opportunity. So they have that plus that title. There's going to be some interesting storylines with it. How are players recovering? Is a player like Maxime Crépeau back? Are players like Daniel Henry playing well? Is this a last run for players like Atiba Hutchinson, Steven Vittoria? Players along that ilk and line. These are questions that we all have to, ask ourselves. But they do offer a very intriguing summer for the men. So I think coming away with a trophy this year is imperative. Whether it's the Gold Cup, whether it's Nations League, they need to win a trophy to really cement their spot as a top 3 nation in CONCACAF when it comes to football/soccer. Let's move over to the women. The X have the World Cup coming. World Cup happening in July to August. I may or may not be there. We'll find out. If you're watching this and there's videos of me surrounded by kangaroo, it's a fun time. But with the women currently ranked number 6 in the world, heading to the World Cup with Nigeria, Australia, and Northern Ireland Ireland in their group. They're expected to move on. So with the Women's World Cup, or the World Cup in 23, a goal I'd like to see them achieve is make the semis. Yes, we talked about legacy a little bit with Atiba. This could be Christine Sinclair's final World Cup. The top goal scorer internationally of all time. Maybe the last one for a player like Desiree Scott. Maybe a player like Sophie Schmidt. We don't know. But with that being the case, it's one last opportunity to really have Canada on the map and playing. And I think, yes, the world has definitely improved on the women's side. We see more European teams emerging. We see great players in CONCACAF emerging, right? Whether they qualify or not, I hope they do. Let's go Haiti. Let's hope you qualify. But this is the last hurrah, the last dance, so to speak. 2023 is going to be the last dance for some of the veterans, some of the faces that have been synonymous with the program. So I think my goal for them is reaching the semis, top 4. I know some may say, why not top 8, make the quarters. I think this team has quality enough to push. They have a goalkeeper in Kaylee Sheridan, who could be one of the best women in the world. They have a midfielder, which is a solid group. They have arguably the best left back in the world in Ashley Lawrence. They have an emerging one in Jade Riviere. We'll get to her in a minute. There's enough on this team for me to think and say they should be a top 4 finishing team, which means to be the best, you have to beat the best. They come in as the Olympic champions, but that means, there's a target on their back. Yeah. So, you got to brush your shoulders off every once in a while. So, women, that's goal number 2. My goal, resolution, make the semis of the World Cup. Resolution number 3. The men's U17 is happening in February, so you're probably seeing this as the first thing. And for me, it is very simple. Qualify for the World Cup. Now, they just had a nice window in Mexico where they played and beat Costa Rica 2-1, but then lost to Mexico 3-0. Mexico is always good developing at this level. And at the youth level, they've always been a good performing team. But again, teams like the United States, countries like that, have continued to emerge as players that need to be reckoned with at the youth level. And at this level, there's definitely opportunities for them to play well, but then also it's a youth tournament. I don't want to put too much on this, but I think every showcase gives them an opportunity to play. And within that showcase, that means they have an opportunity to maybe invite more players, more camps, more friendlies, more players you can integrate into the Canadian system and the outfit. And whether that means duels, bringing players in, I think the more opportunities you have, it works. So for the U17s, they just had one camp there, and then in January, maybe they'll have a short camp before. But this is go time for them. And I do think qualifying for the World Cup is really going to push them to being a very successful team moving forward. A good barometer for a team who hadn't made a World Cup. 2006, Ghana made the World Cup. Their U17 team made the U17 World Cup, made it to the, I believe, the 3rd place game. And then were eliminated and won 3rd or 4th place. And then 2 years later, the core of that team went on to win the U20s. And then the core of that team joined the national team and went on a historic run, being until this year, one of 3 African nations to make the quarterfinals. Morocco is now the only African nation to make the semifinals, so congrats to them on a great World Cup last year. But looking at how they're able to integrate players like that, it's a very interesting and good model to look at. I'm not saying that the players on this U17 team are going to be the players playing for the national team, but that's a country that did it. They were able to successfully integrate the core of a World Cup team with the core of a World Cup winning team at the youth level and gain success. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on that I'd be very much excited to see. Number 4. 6 new players called up for both national teams. Now, it seems like a very small number. And what do I constitute as new? What do I qualify as new? To me, I look at a player who is new to playing at the senior level. So players who were called up before, I don't qualify them as that. Players who already played, I don't qualify. So a Theo Corbeanu, I don't consider him new. Maybe what some of the U20s, if they came in, I would consider them. Players maybe who are starting to peak into their primes now are players who are playing very well and deserve the call-up and the recognition. Right? We're looking at players like maybe a Rich Yennon if he's able to play well, a Theo Bear, a Victor Lattori, right? On the men's side, to name a few. Right? That's not all of them, but to name a few. And then you look at the women's side, we look at the U20s coming through, right? What happens to Anna Karpenko as she continues to develop? What happens with players who are going to go pro? Are we able to find more players maybe who are sitting on the outskirts in Europe looking to have an opportunity to play? Right? And I think that's a big opportunity. Yes, after the World Cup, remember, there is Olympic qualifiers, which we'll get to a little bit later. So, with that being the case, there is some opportunity, maybe, we knock on wood for any injuries. However, I think it'd be a good opportunity. The women may be a little bit more difficult, but I'd love to see it. 6 new players brought in who haven't played national team yet. That would be number 4 for me. Number 5, the women to qualify for Paris 24. Now, as full disclosure, I do think the Olympics should be U23. That's just my personal opinion. That being said, we are still, Canadians are, the Olympic champions on the women's side for football, soccer. And I think going back and defending their title is important. Now, also qualifying and winning their playoff with Jamaica, which is happening in September, late September, means they also automatically qualify for the Women's Gold Cup happening next summer. So there's a lot on the line for that. So Canada having the opportunity to go through, not to say that I expect them to go through, but Jamaica's at the Olympics, is going to the World Cup. Jamaica is going to the World Cup, and that means they'll have an opportunity to play top teams, not to mention a team like Canada, who is a top team. And both those experiences post-World Cup, we'll see injuries, we'll see players who maybe emerge, and we'll be looking to see how they are able to truly perform. But qualifying for the 24 Olympics in Paris is important. That's reso number 5. Number 6, national team games. And this is more of a personal preference. Just with the growth of the game, I would love to see national team games in the province of Quebec and Manitoba. You know, we see what the CPL has been able to do for Valor and Manitoba, and I think they do have a stadium. The issue with stadiums in Canada is there are so few grass stadiums, which means you are limited essentially to Toronto, Montreal, and then in the women's case, you know, Vancouver, which is their unofficial home base. But I would love to see Quebec and Manitoba national team fixtures, whether that is the men's, whether that's the women's, setting them up for the World Cup, whether it's the men's Nations League. I think definitely there's an opportunity to grow the sport. Again, it doesn't have to be the Invitational Tour. I know on the men's side, a lot of players are more comfortable in Toronto because that's a consistency. They know that. But still, give me some friendlies or some matchups where perhaps get the opportunity to see them play and get more fans to really get on board and grow off of the momentum of last year and really push the sport a little bit further on. Number 7. My resolution number 7 is to have this bargaining complete with the national teams. I mean, we've had glimpses, we have people who've made promises, who've said this is definitely coming. But so far all we have is a likeness agreement with Alphonso Davies, which allegedly will be going through with the rest of the players. Let me know if this has happened. I have no idea. But having likeness disputes, naming rights, all these things, this needs to be resolved this year, especially when we look at the influx of, sponsorship that's come in since the men have come to the World Cup. It's important that the national team players are compensated appropriately, not to what one can achieve, but appropriately. So that is number 7. Get this bargaining complete. Let's stop bargaining through the media. Let's get it down, get it on paper, and then let us get back to the pitch. By the way, I do side with the players, but that's besides the point. Let's get it done and get back to the pitch. Number 8, appropriately number 8, with Project 8, that's the Women's Domestic League in Canada. We have Foothills, we have Vancouver Whitecaps. Who's next? Do we find a team in Montreal? Perhaps a team in Ontario? Maybe the Maritimes get in. Who are the next teams? I hope we're able to get the whole league sorted and found over this next little bit. That's a whole year to do so. They'll have the Women's World Cup to watch and get truly inspired. And maybe that pushes a few more investors to say, let's pour some more money to make sure we have the next Evelyn Vienne, that we have the next Jade Revere, that we have the next Ashley Lawrence on home soil. Who are the next franchises? Who are the next teams? Even more importantly, who are the next sponsors? That is number 8. What happens? My resolution for that is I hope we are able to have this all figured out by September, so that as we enter next year, we are ready. And I say next year because it'll be next year in 24. We'll be ready. Resolution goal question number 9. Jade Riviere is rehabbing right now. She posted some videos on her Twitter, and it's great to see her rehabbing. Now, interestingly enough, her name was not a name that was entered at recording into the NWSL draft, which leads me to believe, I with my detective cap, that she may be headed somewhere. Now, could that somewhere be Europe? I've always just been a sender to Chelsea, because apparently all Canadians are going to Chelsea now, but maybe not. Apparently Canadians are now going to Chelsea and Arsenal. Shout out to Sabrina D'Angelo. Well, instead up. Making her way, alleged right now, reports are she may be headed towards Arsenal. Chloe Lacasse reporting is gathering interest from Arsenal as well as Bayern Munich. So, where does Jade Riviere end up? And that is very intriguing to me. I hope it's a club there, or even as a low-key interesting note, Mexico. Ligue Mexi Femin. There is a Canadian coach there who could do a great job. We've already seen one North American player, Mia Fischel, truly excel under her coaching. I wonder what Jade Riviere could do. Jade Riviere going abroad, whether it's Mexico, whether it's England, or perhaps somewhere else. Which leads me to number 10. Number 10. I'd love to see a Canadian in the top 5 European leagues on both the men and the women's side. Right now, we have just women in the Prem: Kadisha Buchanan, Riley Foster, as well as more. I know Jessie Fleming's there. But we got women in the WSL. We don't have men in the Premier League. In Darkina's Ligue 1 in France, we have players in both the men's and the women's. Shout out to Ugbo, Gilles, and company. Grosso in the Italian League. Davies in the German League. No one in Spain. And then we got Lacasse and our boy Eustáquio in the Portuguese League. I'd love to see players in all those leagues. I'd love to be able to turn on a league and know, hey, there's a Canadian player. I do that with Ghanaians. I do this. I'd love to do it with Canadians as well. So whether that's moving, I know there's maybe hopes that a player like Tejan Buchanan ends up in Milan. Perhaps a player like Jonathan David ends up in the Prem. Who knows where the opportunities come, and maybe it comes from a player we don't even see coming. But I would love to see it by 2023's end, a Canadian, even more specifically a national team player, Canadian, in each of these top 5 leagues. I know I've said 6 leagues: Italian, German, Spanish, French, English. Would love to see a Canadian in 5 of these leagues, both men and women. And let's take us a little bit more local now for resolution number 11. This is the last year for League 1 in Ontario before they move to their 3-tiered. So if you're not aware, League 1 Ontario is moving towards a Premier League, a Championship League, and then a second division where, second teams, new teams coming in will be in, and they're going to accumulate the points over these last 2 seasons to rank teams accordingly. So with more League 1 teams wanting to join, they'll start off in the 3rd tier, and then from points-wise, they can move up to tier so you can keep the competition a little bit more, grouped and categorized. For the sport to grow, it's going to need some more airtime, and I think One Soccer's in a great spot where they can build up some more. Now, they did a good job broadcasting the Women's Championships, the League 1 Women's Championships, which was a good showcase of that, but with the CPL, I know it'll be an interesting year next year. It'll be a packed year. You know, we'll have the Women's World Cup, you'll have the Gold Cup, you have Nations League, you have friendlies and games, She Believes Cup for the women early in the year. However, I think One Soccer has an opportunity where they can, whether that's on their page or maybe their YouTube, have a League One showcase matchup, right? And just use that as an opportunity to really promote. Now, they can spread that around. It doesn't have to all be Ontario. I know Ontario's doing the pro route, but I think in order to grow the sport more, we need to give showcases similar to, you know, what CBC was doing with the CPL in its early days, giving it a few matches here to really grow interest and have people tune in. I believe One Soccer really could do a good job in growing the ability of following, you know, the players of tomorrow. The one thing in Canada is, while we're creating more pathways, you want to sometimes highlight the pathways that are there. More will be developed as we continue to grow, but let's showcase what we have and learn from it and grow from it. It's going to be a very crucial 4 years. Leading to number 12, a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, you know, stat keeping. Better stat tracking for both League Ones and U Sports across the board, right? Both across Canada and then in BC, Ontario, and Quebec for League Ones. Better stat tracking would be very much appreciated. Shout out to Josh from the Step Over for bringing this one up to my attention. Truly do appreciate that. And I think, yeah, if we're able to do that, maybe that gives us an opportunity to really highlight some of the players who are doing well. Maybe that gives more of those players more avenues to be seen. I know U Sport is big for the CPL draft, and then when you look further, when you see things such as Project 8 coming along for the women. But we want to give players who are looking to do this on a professional level every opportunity they have, and that means, you know, getting them as much access to data as possible. So let's start, you know, doing little things. Updating stats, stat tracking at a good rate so that we can. Now again, some of this is on a volunteer basis, we understand, but let's try to take a step forward with this. Number 13. Number 13, we're going to Mexico, and a very low-key aspect of last year on the women's side is Canadian coaches winning. Rhiannon Wilkinson with the Portland Timbers. I said the Timbers. Rhiannon Wilkinson with the Portland Thorns winning the NWSL Championship. Carmelina Moscato winning with Tigres, Liga FemMex, and Rhiannon has stepped down from her post at Portland. And we're not going to get into that too much, but we'll cut on it. But with Carm down in Mexico, what is the next step that happens? And I've already mentioned, low-key, I think maybe Jade going down to Mexico wouldn't be a bad shout for her to continue to develop under a Canadian coach and really have opportunities. But is she able in that league now to become a beacon to get players in? With Liga MX growing, especially on the women's side, the NWSL isn't the only fish in the pond. And with the Canadian Domestic League coming, the NWSL isn't the only fish in the pond. So the question now becomes, can they start to get more players? Is Carm able to recruit, adding players to her squad? Signing players out and developing, and whether that turns into transfers out, whether that turns into just long careers. What is she able to do? I am very curious, and it's more of a question for me. I am very much wondering what happens with Carm in year 2 in Liga MX Fem. And Tigres, the unofficial official Team Canada of Liga MX Fem, is a thing and a moniker we will wear with pride. That is number 13. Now to number 14. Transparency from the CSA. Now, when I say transparency from CSA, that also does include things such as bargaining agreements with the national teams. but it also comes with keeping us informed. I think one of the major lessons that they learned going to the Men's World Cup was that they really weren't prepared for what was going to happen, and they just unfamiliar territory for them. But how do they improve? I heard this comment on the Northern Futbol podcast. Is how do they improve the transparency both sides, but then also giving the opportunities to create the stories and the narratives that can help positively impact the game? Similar to that, for the fans who follow, like, can we be transparent with things when things are coming? Let us get ahead of them versus have fans who want to support be scrambling because we get news last minute. If there are camps, announce them. Be proud of them, not secretive, because there are fans who do want to support these players. Whether they are youth, whether they are para, whether they are senior national teams. There are fans who want to support, and they can only support as much as they know. Communicate. Learn from the mistakes from last year, having that transparency with what is happening. Because the more fans know, the easier it is to support or have a decision made versus being stuck in a limbo. Transparency from the CSA. That is something, a resolution that I would like to see. Number 15. Do Canada Soccer end up on a channel that is not One Soccer this year? Now, TSN does have the rights to the World Cup, so TSN will be broadcasting the Women's World Cup, and they have those broadcast rights. However, with CBC, TSN, especially Sportsnet, we're starting to see what shapes up with the MLS Apple TV agreement. So we're starting to kind of see how that's going to look. But does another broadcaster make a play to get some Canada football soccer content on its airways? I've always maintained that I think 2024 is an interesting year because with the Women's Gold Cup, someone could go for the rights for that. Granted, yes, One Soccer does have the rights to national team games. However, tournaments aren't necessarily that. So would a Sportsnet go after maybe the Women's Gold Cup? How does the Nations League work out from a broadcasting standpoint? Does CBC maybe get the rights to Nations League so that they can see Canada go in? Will we see a national team on something other than TSN or One Soccer? An actual live game. At the Gold Cup for the women and qualifiers for the World Cup and the Olympics, they had some games on CBC, but that agreement was a little bit tape delayed. And so ratings were able to be pulled, but it was on a rebroadcast, so we didn't see it. So I think that's an interesting question for this year. Will we see more outside of that? A question. What happens, number 16? What happens in Portlandia? Now, Portlandia was a moment of pride, but now it's marred with a little bit of controversy with Rhiannon Wilkinson stepping down from her post. Questions about Karina LeBlanc in her position. We've had Sinclair issuing statements with Merritt Paulson leaving that left some people a little bit, unsatisfied, to say the least. What does the aftermath of that look like? Portlandia used to be a beacon of Canadian work, and it's at the risk of perhaps not being there anymore. Are they able to weather this properly and learn from their mistakes? Will Portlandia continue to be? Janine Beck has already stated that she will be returning to the club. LeBlanc is still in her post at this moment of recording, and Sinclair said she'll be back. So there are some pieces, but there are definitely lessons that need to be made, and especially in the light of the Yates report, which leads me to number 17. With Sierra McCormick, not even the rumblings, with Sierra McCormick and everything we now know about sport in Canada, national sport organizations, how do we actually create safe sport? My resolution is we actually put actions to where our mouths are and create these saving work environments for players. Well, that means being accountable to the mistakes that we've left. Right? Those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat it. So the question now becomes, are the right people in charge to ensure that we don't have a repeat of what happened? All right? Will safe sport actually be effective, or does it need something else? It's not lost on me that the Vancouver Whitecaps on the women's side are the first women's team to jump in and be involved with the Women's Domestic League, which is great. But it's not lost on me that they're also the team that's been embroiled in a lot of this controversy. So, have we learned enough? Will we not make the same mistakes? Or will our hubris bound us to make the same mistakes again? Will we chase success at the cost of the well-being of players? These are all questions that we have to answer, and we have to do a better job. And that starts from the beginning. And whether that's putting players, the right faces, and the right people in those positions, who knows? But we have to take steps in the right direction to make sure that we don't have a repeat of what has happened. That's number 17. Number 18. CPL teams. This is more of a goal for me. I'd like the CPL to introduce a second tier or finally start to implement academies. Now, if you're not aware, CPL does have a U21 rule or U25 or U23 rule. And to me, whenever a league introduces something like that, to me it's more of an indictment of we are trying to solve an issue by creating this rule until we are able to implement the thing that we want to. And in the case of that, no teams have academies. Now, there's been talks of Atletico Ottawa perhaps having a U23 team that either plays in the PLSQ or League One Ontario. That would be great. If League One becomes that second tier for where teams play, that's amazing. However, that league needs more development opportunities. Which is why I think I was always under the impression, that's why I think ultimately League One teams are the key to the success of football, soccer in Canada, because their structure, their academy setups can offer a backway portal for teams to find players. We've seen already, right? Players like Lowell Wright on the U20 side, Enco, who went straight from League One to the CPL, now is in the MLS Pro, Next Pro. There are pathways, and I think the more we're able to empower those sides, and I think that will be also the same on the women's side, the more we can empower those people who have the infrastructure already, I think that opens the door. But I think the CPL definitely needs some opportunities for other tiers, especially when it comes to players from the draft that maybe, they don't have the opportunity to play if they don't make the team, but maybe somewhere that guarantees them minutes to play and to develop. And maybe having, a second tier team that plays in a League One Ontario, or, plays in the CPL too, or an academy league, so to speak. It's not going to be created this year, but my goal and resolution, my dream is to have it be initialized, and have it be an initiative for the upcoming next season. Number 19. Shout out to W Soccer for suggesting this to me. I did tweak it. She did say 25, but because it's 2023, I'm saying 23. 23 new professional players. Now, are we counting the NWSL? Yes. Are we counting League One? It's technically our highest league, but 23 new Canadians playing professionally on the women's side. Get a contract, ladies, wherever you are. 23. I think that is more than reasonable. Here we go. Now, special shout out to W Soccer and her map that she has. Right now we have many Canadians who are playing collegiately. You know, from Jessica DeFilippo playing, and Sarah Lynn playing in the SEC, to players like Maya Antoine, also at Vanderbilt, to players like Amanda West and Anna Bout at Pitt, Florence Van Cool, and more players on their way. Right now, I think we count about, and these are just seniors, by the way, about almost 30 seniors plus players who are coming in as freshmen. So there's a lot of opportunity, not to mention some of the U17 who started to declare, players from Amanda Allen, Ella Otti, Rosa Malouf, Renee Watson. Now, I'm not expecting those players to go professional, but once you get to that junior/senior year, there is opportunities. And I think to have those players have the opportunity to get contracts would speak volumes. And I think that's a lofty goal for us to hold on to and to push. Now, maybe when we start our league, that makes it a little bit more manageable and attainable to have 23 players with going professional. However, I think there's enough quality that they can truly play well and give a good showing for a professional career. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes. That is 19. 20. That's, to me, whenever the send-off is. So right now, for the women, they're playing the She Believes Cup in February, and then there's a July window. So with that being the case, more than likely, a send-off match, unless they are outside of the country. There's April. Bev says they are planning on being in Canada, which should be the send-off. Wherever the send-off is my goal, I want to sell out. 23, 25. If it's in Vancouver, give me the 40. Give me the 40 piece. If it's in Toronto, give me the 20 piece. Let's sell out and send off this team for the World Cup of their lives. That is a goal. That's 2 games, 2 match window. More than likely, what we've been seeing is a lot of just double matchups, double headers, getting a team one spot so they don't have to travel too much, which makes sense, especially heading into a World Cup year. However, get wherever they are, they're trying to play at home, get these ladies the send-off they deserve. Like I said, if it's in Vancouver, give them the 40 piece. If it's in Toronto, give them the 20 piece. If it's in Montreal, give them the 20 piece. Let's sell this out. If it's in Edmonton, give them the 60 piece. Give them that Commonwealth send-off. Give them the send-off that they deserve before the World Cup of their lives. Now, when we get to 21, this is a bit more of a selfish one for me, I'm not going to lie. But, could Ike Ugbo start a game, like, that isn't in some sort of quote-unquote extreme temperatures, right? He played a little bit in Edmonton, and then the last start he got was the rainstorm in Honduras. Now and Ugbo represents it a little bit more in terms of who is the next 9, right? You know it's Jonathan David, you know Kyle Laren. You have players who can play there in a pinch. However, can we see what Ugbo can do at this level? Because if we aren't able to do it, then what are we going to do? Now, it's tough for that player because that player, there are a few 9s who were playing better than Jonathan David last year, but with a player like Laren not able to get minutes, you would have thought he had the opportunity to really break through, but he wasn't given that opportunity. So with that being the case, does Herdman give it? Now, Ugbo has to earn it, no doubt about it, but can Ugbo do something at the 9 in CONCACAF competition? Can he offer something to give a three-headed striker trio? And that's the question. Can he do that? So, will Ugbo get a start? Players like him, Christian Gutierrez, they're real. I promise you, they're real. Players who get called but never get playtime, will they get there? And Ugbo to me represents a little bit bigger one from there. So that is 21. Now, when we get to number 22, this is a conversation with Bev. Will we see three at the back? And I want to be more specific with that. Will we see Bev experimenting with formations when her back isn't against the wall? That is a question that I'm curious about. We do have some center back depth that could allow us to play a three at the back, whether you want to go Zadorsky, Buchanan, and Gilles, or if you want to go Rose, Buchanan, and Gilles, or if you want to go Buchanan, Zadorsky, Rose. Again, there's 4 players, 3. You do the probabilities of players. But it ultimately comes down to the depth that we have in the program and wondering how well do we actually dig into it versus do we just go with the 11 to 13 players that Bev really relies on. We know Bev likes her bets. There's no doubt about that. And you saw that especially in CONCACAF W. Any chance she had to supplement, she was leaning on Chapman. She was looking for Sophie Schmidt. And, so with players, they have to earn it with any team, that's fine. But I do wonder if we see some sort of experimentation, especially when it comes to, they have the She Believes Cup, which is 3 top tier teams that they'll be playing. I don't know about availability as of now, but it would be a perfect opportunity to experiment with different formations, different things, see what can and can't work. We don't have a full bevy of players, right? We're missing 2 forwards, if you want to call that. I would look at them more as wingers, in Deanne Rose and Nichelle Prince. We're missing other players going through, so it'll be interesting where the depth that goes. And on that note, even where does Bev really put? Does she sacrifice one position for another? Right? Does she try to rely on midfielders? I mean, who do you leave off? Is Sinclair at her age still worth starting and trying to go for 50 to 60 minutes? Or would you rather start off with a Sophie Schmidt or even a Quinn alongside with Grosso and Fleming? I think Grosso and Fleming are your 2 midfield starters, and the question becomes now, who else do you add? Which is why I think a 3 at the back could be intriguing, because it does give you the opportunity. You can have a center back step up, and then it does become more of that traditional 4-3-3. Or you can play maybe a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. They have experimented with that. But if you go 3-5-2, now you're really relying on your fullbacks to bring in that delivery. Now, with Jade Riviere starting to recover, she certainly could and has shown that range of play. But are you better off having your fullbacks be your main suppliers of the ball, or are you willing to look at other players? And then you have to factor in a player like Janine Becky. So many questions, so many possibilities. What do we do? But I think how Bev experiments, that will be interesting to see. And it's something I want to see her try to do, because I'd rather have, at least in the back of her mind, she knows what she can and can't do versus having to discover the ability of a formation or players at the biggest stage because they haven't had a chance to really test it out yet. Now, 23 is... We talked about communication, and this is a thing for me that, it kind of came up when we had our conversation with Mission 26, Crates Freights. We don't even have a youth national team account. Like, you go to Canada Soccer's website and you look at the different teams, and all they do have is the men's national team, Nations League, the women's national team, She Believes Cup, right? And it's like the U17s are playing too, and I think for Canada to really take a step, we have to start to play. They have stuff on the para team, they have stuff on the E teams, but there's nothing on the youth side, which is, I think, a little disappointing just to really start the push. Now, maybe that changes when the tournament comes closer, but it is a tournament, especially with these next 4 years. They do matter when it comes to recruitment, getting players in. You could be seeing some of these players on the national team potentially, if not in this next 4 years, but in these next 8 years. So we gotta show that these other tournaments, the other things matter. It can't just be, and that kind of blends into the whole conversation of, consistency and just being clear with communication, transparency, and whatnot. But put in the effort and show that they care. Because truly, like, just something as little as promoting U17 and having that there and going, kind of blending on that, we do need a proper national youth developer coach. For me, I would love for that. Yes, it's good to have them involved with the national team, but I would love for that player, for those coaches, to be a little bit separate, where they can start to, find talent and find players, not necessarily for how the team is played, but just find talented players and then figure out how they mesh onto the pitch. I think on the women's side, you see that it's a bit of a difficulty because there isn't a league here. So for the most part, the only pathway is truly through national development centers, youth teams, and moving forward, right? And that's a bit difficult. With the men's side, you have, the CPL, you have MLS, you have collegiate route, you have U Sport, NCAA. So there's multiple pathways that they can look and try to keep track of players. But when it comes to on the women's side, they need more of that. So that's 23. 23 is show that you care about the youth, actually promote and talk about it, but then also get some proper structure there. Get a national youth development director for both men and women. Get someone there, the coach, again, for me, it would be nice to have them a little bit separate of that, but I understand the benefits of having them part of the senior coaching staff and then having that play through. But find those aspects and those coaches where they can kind of play through, and so you can get the talent, you can get it together, because it just feels with the lack of promotion, what we don't see makes me feel like we're not also paying attention to it. And if it feels like they're not paying attention to it, it feels when results don't go the same way, it feels like, well, we didn't really put in a solid effort. So that's 23. Bonus number 24 is Evelyn Vian, the 9 of these next 4 years for Canada. To me, yes. Yeah. So get Vian some starts. That's number 24. Bonus for everybody. Anyways, guys, those are my 23 plus ones. What do you guys think? What are some of your resolutions you have for soccer in Canada? There's lots of things I didn't think of putting in, whether it's having an actual national camp. I know there's the Woodbridge camp that they're talking about potentially to work through. There's questions about CPL expansions and the size of stadiums. I don't know why everything is 5 to 7. Why not someone just push for 10? I understand Moncton hasn't been used in a minute, but hey, build for where you think you will be, not for what you think you are right now, right? And it's an easy to say from this standpoint, but I think we may be better suited just to push up, and that opens it up, right? Even little things like, why don't we play more friendlies in Canada across, especially with the youth teams? I feel that's a great opportunity to play friendlies across Canada, get players in, bring other national teams here, use that as a recruitment piece. But hey, those are some of the other ones I left on the cutting room floor. But you guys, let me know in the comments below, what are some resolutions you have for Canada soccer for 2023? Let me know. And guys, until next time, we're good. We'll stop.